coming back to join me for episode 3. It is the third episode already. I can't believe it. Time is flying and we doing it, okay? We just gonna keep showing up. And so on today's episode, honey, of Keep Showing Up, we're gonna talk about being real grown. So today's title is Now Friend, I'm Real Grown. Okay. So if you haven't already, go ahead and like this page in this video and subscribe and hit the bell so you can get notified every time we upload a new video. And if you're new here, let me know in the comments that you joined us today. And let's get started. Okay, friends, let me tell you. So now that we are on episode 3, like I'm trying to go a little less kicking and screaming with Jesus, okay? And so at the end of my last 2 podcasts, on the first one, immediately, right? Like I was like deeper. And I was like, how deep should I have gone on the first episode, right? And so, we had this little back and forth volley type situation. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's go to episode 2. And I go to episode 2 and I finished episode 2. I was like, okay, I feel more comfortable. Right? Like there's still some nerves there, but I feel a little bit more comfortable in what's going on. And so hit the end recording button and immediately that was like deeper. I like I know you're lying. Like how much deeper? Like this is enough, Lord. Okay. You want me to make my bed in heaven? Like, I don't understand. This is as deep as we need to be. Okay. So, so again, I'm praying, trying to figure out, like how deep should I go? And so today we're gonna talk about being real grown. And so our title today of today's podcast is Now Friend, I'm Real Grown. Okay. So sit back, let's chill, and let's talk about grown folk business. Okay. So listen, let me tell you. I tried to do this podcast without my notes. Well, without y'all seeing my notes. I didn't feel right. I didn't feel good about it. It's hard to edit out. So I keep my notes in my phone, and the phone is here, and we're gonna be reading the notes from the phone just to help me keep on track and just to help me feel more comfortable. Like I just need the notes, and it breaks my concentration when I'm trying to look for the notes in my phone and act like the phone ain't there and look at y'all and not break eye contact with y'all and read my notes and come back and remember my notes because I'm old, okay? I can't remember like I used to. So, anywho, the phone is here. The phone is here to stay. I'm going to have my notes. I'll be glancing down at my notes, reading my scriptures, whatever the case is. But just welcome the phone. Let's get used to the phone, but I'll try to make sure that I'm continuously making eye contact. Okay. Um, Thanks for being a part of the journey. Hashtag growth. Okay. So, when I was a kid, I remember watching adults, right? Like watching grown folks, if you will, watching grown folks like go on and carry on about their life, like, and it just seemed like they didn't have any restrictions. So I'm a kid. I got to wash dishes. I got to clean my room. I have to sweep and mop and whatever my chores are, right? Like I have my own chores. And I just felt like my parents, like they wasn't they was living their best life. Like in my mind. In my mind, it felt like they didn't have these chores that they had to do. Nobody was riding their back about getting their dishes done at a certain cadence or doing this or that at a certain time. Sweep and mop the floor, get your room clean your bathroom. Like I just didn't feel like, or from my perspective, I didn't feel like I seen, understood that was happening for them, right? Like it was like I was the slave, Cinderella, okay, to me in my mind. And my parents, they were just chilling. Like, get the remote. Okay, I definitely was a part of the come in here and bring me this remote generation. And so I just felt like this is what is happening, right? Like I was born to be their slave. And they just gonna slave me until forever. I'm gonna have to wash all of their dishes. I'm gonna have to vacuum and sweep the floors. And they just get to chill and have fun with their friends. And so as watching that, I wanted that. Like I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to grow up, baby. I cannot wait to be a grown folk. Okay. I can't wait to have grown folks business. I can't wait to send my kids away so I can talk about grown folks business. I just cannot wait to have all of these. Like I wanted all of the things that I felt like that grown people had at the time. And so it's a very limited perspective, right? Like as a kid, I don't know. I feel like they live in their life scot free, no rules, no anything. But the reality is they got taxes, they got laws, they got jobs, they got to get up and get the kids ready for school and take the kids to school. Like I think that was grossly um underperceived on my end, if you will, because it's like, honey, getting up and taking the kid to school every day at 7 o'clock, and then especially working from home now, like, and I don't have to necessarily be getting up. It's tough. And so, but as a kid, you just feel like they do whatever, and I have to do all of these other things, and so, um, it's nothing like I expected now that I'm here on the other side of the coin. The bills, the laws, honey, the taxes don't ever stop. They're coming out of your check. You pay the property taxes, you pay the taxes at the store, taxes everywhere. Okay. And so it's just not what I was expecting it to be. It's not the freedom that I was expecting it to be. Okay. And so it is something that I do say all the time. Like, I probably haven't said it as much now in I'll say my recently enlightened state or more enlightened of what it is to be real grown. But it is something that I used to say often. It's just like, I'm real grown. I felt like to me, real grown was just being fully independent, right? Like my mom, she used to always be like, you ain't grown until you take care of yourself. You get out of my house, you ain't in my pocket, all of that stuff. And so I'm just like now and for a minute, I've been fully independent. I have our own family. We take care of our own things. We're not looking for anything from our family. I'm not asking my hand out to my mama. Let me take that back. My hand is out to my mama because I really would like for her to pay these student loans off. Amen. So, I mean, I asked for my mom, just because I like to beg from her, but not necessarily because there is a need. So I'm fully independent in terms of being grown. According to that definition, right, of being grown, taking care of yourself, being self-sufficient, and not needing um, that additional help and background from a parent, being able to do that. And so in that though, I used to say it all the time. Like my husband, he was like, "You need to do this or that," and I'd be like, don't try to tell me what to do. I'm real grown, okay? I'm real grown. I ain't coming in the house at no certain time. I'm real grown. I ain't doing that. I'm not going over there. I'm not picking that up. I'm not showing up at that time. Like I'm real grown, and so for a season, a good little season of my life. That was probably top five saying. I'm real grown, okay? And so I started thinking about like what I didn't start thinking about what it meant to be real grown. Life started lifing. Like life started lifing and it helped me to realize, girl, real grown ain't real grown. Okay. Like it's so many things that go into that. And so I think, we just overlook it. Like we just overlook it thinking I'll grow up. This is what my life is. This is what my life is going to be. This is what my life has become. And, you just get into the routine. And so kind of thinking back to the things that I've observed from my mom, like when she took care of us and cooking every day and she cleaned and washing our clothes and all of that kind of stuff. Like I always kind of perceived my mom as someone who had everything together, right? Like, um, She was always well spoken in like a career field or whatever. She was always from my limited perspective, she always had it together. Like everything was just always together. Um, I didn't, if she felt flustered when I was a kid, I didn't necessarily feel that. I just felt like she was, she had it. She had it together. She, I didn't know anything about bills. I didn't know anything about any of that stuff until later on when I got a little bit older. And so I just felt like she had it together. Like she had all of her things, all of her ducks was in a row. Um, and so now growing up and having different conversations with my mom is like it's like a night and day experience, right? Like you live your life in parallel with your parents. Like you both sitting at the dinner table, you both driving to school in the morning, you both, are having conversations getting in the tub at night and eating dinner and all that stuff. You're living kind of a parallel experience. But when you think about the limited per- perception and perspective that you have as a child to what your parents are actually enduring in their actual adult life, it's night and day. Like it's night and day. It's shocking, and it's hard for you to understand as a kid the things and responsibilities that your parents have. Like to me as a child, I felt like, oh, I got to clean. I got to wash the dishes. I have to clean my room up. I have to clean the bathroom up and make my bed up. And my parents don't do anything. They don't clean and all of that stuff, but they go to work. They pay the bills. I didn't really want for anything when I was a younger child. Like everything that I wanted, it was getting bought for me, and provided for me. And so just kind of thinking through that in those experiences of like what I saw as a kid as them living a scot-free life, like they were providing, going to work and doing all of that stuff. And then not to mention any of their relational things that have been experienced, right? Like if you are going through things with your friends or going through things with your spouse or going through things at work, like I didn't, like I have work stress, I have church stress, I have kid stress, I have friend stress, I have stresses in life. And so as a kid, your perspective is so limited to those few minutes that you spend with your parent driving to school, sitting at dinner. Um, and my mom used to make us go to bed at 8. I used to hate it because if I live in Texas, and so if you live in Texas, we have daylight savings time, and some nights at 8, the sun is not gone down, okay? So I used to hate getting in the bed when the sun was still shining. Like it was just so difficult. I hated it. It was the worst. And so I used to complain to my mom about going to bed when the sun was shining, and she put a whole comforter up over the window to make it dark and was like, okay, is this better? Because honey, you was going to bed at 8. Okay, that was it. She didn't play that. The bedtime was 8, period. There wasn't no discussion. You wasn't getting an extra 5 minutes. Like you going to bed at 8. And so when you think about that, you spend 8 hours at school, they spend 8 hours, 8-ish hours at work. Um, you wake up in the morning, you're getting dressed, then y'all are both gone on for your day. You get picked up from school. You probably at daycare for a little minute. Or for me, my grandmother kept us. So I was at my grandmother's, my great grandmother's actually. I was at my great grandmother's, and then the parent pick you up, right? So I probably got picked up maybe 5 or 6, and then we going to bed at 8. So that's 2 hour time span of being and spending time with your parents. So like you're living this life, um, but you don't know what's happening, right? Like you don't know what's happening on the other side. You don't know what they're experiencing, or what they're going through, how they're handling those relationships. So yeah, that's a limited amount of time to, spend with your parent to get to understand and know, what they're experiencing and what's happening and what's not, and what are their emotions and what they have going on. And so I remember as a teenager, I just felt like my mama just did not understand my life. What I was going through is probably the toughest time for me, it was definitely I mean, I, for me, it was definitely the toughest time. Um, one of the toughest times of my life in terms of my relationship with my mom, and I just felt like she didn't understand, and she wasn't trying to understand, and like she didn't understand what I was experiencing, what I was enduring, the thoughts that I was having, the emotions that I was having, the feelings that I was having in my body. Like she didn't get it, and like that was it. When I tried to talk to her, we disconnected. We wasn't on the same page, and so because of that, like I'm like, okay, she don't get it. She's living her adult life. She don't have no real things going on and all that kind of stuff. And so we were just disconnected. We were disconnected because of that. And so now as a parent, I can I can give her more grace, right? Like I can give her all the grace. Because from like I said, my limited perspective as a child, I felt like she had everything together. But like I think it's because her generation, that's the perception that they want us from my limited perception of, my mom having everything together as a kid or even as a teen. Like, I didn't give her no grace. Like, there was no grace. It was all about my struggle, my story, my plight, and you don't care about it, and you not trying to help me. You're not trying to understand me, what I'm going through, and so there was no grace from that perception and from that perspective. Um, but now on the other side, like being a parent, I can see where grace is needed. But I think mostly my mom anyway. I don't. I think my mom is Gen X. Yeah, I think my mom is Gen X. So mostly from that perspective, I believe that her generation kind of prided themselves on feeling or the perception of having everything together and having everything worked out, whether it was to children or coworkers, family, friends, whatever the case may be. And I feel as though that was a major part of it, right? Like it. So to me, I didn't know that grace was needed because it seemed like she had it all together. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know if she cried at night. I don't know if how things affected her, and so I think um largely in terms of emotional things, I don't really remember from the top of my head. I don't really remember sharing overly emotional conversations with my mom about her. Right? Like, yes, she got emotional about me and being boy crazy or making C's because, honey, C's was not allowed for Paisley. But now my little sister, she ran amok. But that's a story for another day. So yes, if there were things that I was doing wrong, like I did see emotion from her, but in terms of like anything that was going on with her life, and I'm not saying that she should vent down to me or anything like that, but if from a kid perspective, I don't know that you're going through anything. I don't know. Like, let me lighten up on my mom this week. I'm tap dancing on her nerves a little hard, and the world is raging out of control and work is crazy and her relationship with her husband might be crazy, a relationship with her friends or coworkers. I don't know that stuff. I don't see that stuff because my perspective is so tiny of what she might be enduring and experiencing. And there's no sharing back and forth. Now, because of that, I give grace now, right? I don't know if there's such thing as post-operative grace, but we made that up, okay? So I can give her some post grace after like now being a parent and seeing like you don't have it all together. You don't know all of the things. Like you don't know what's the best way. And so I think because I didn't get that conversation. I didn't get that understanding when I was with my mom or I'm living with my mom as a kid. I definitely try to have that conversation with my daughter. Like sometimes she come ask stuff, girl, I don't know. Like I don't know. Let's look it up. Let's Google it. And matter of fact, I be telling her, don't come ask me nothing. Did you Google it? Did you YouTube first? Like, don't come and ask me unless you have already looked it up, like and Googled it and YouTubed it, and then now let's talk about it. And I don't know if that's the right way or not, but I'm a millennial parent, honey. We grew up with electronics and technology, and I just feel like it's too much knowledge at our fingertips to be solely dependent on so many other people and different factors. And um, so I think it is important to do that, but I think it's important to be transparent with your kids and say, life and like you ain't got to tell them the details, like the car no do, the house no do, and I ain't got none of it. I feel like you need to tell those details, but I do think that you just need to say, you know what, take it easy on me this week, okay? Like I can't add one more thing, okay? The straw is going to break the camel's back, honey. Don't do it. And so I think it is good. It's beneficial to have those kind of conversations with your kid and your spouse, family, your immediate family in general. Like people should know in your household what's going on with you emotionally. And I definitely think like in our generation, um, in my house, I feel like it was lacking growing up, having that communication, just like that everything isn't to get all together. Everything isn't functioning and working well. And, there are things that I need to work on, and I'm struggling with things emotionally, and I'm struggling with things financially, and I'm struggling with things, mentally. Um, like I'm struggling. Like I think I never had that perception of my mom that I can remember ever until maybe around 17 or 18, maybe even later. I think I might have been pregnant with my daughter, so that would make me about 18 or 19. So, but by that time, I've endured my whole childhood and not given any grace and not understood her perspective or her capacity or what she's doing and how she's doing it and how she's putting the things together. And so I didn't gain that as a parent in terms of communicating, right? That's something I had to learn and take away on my own. And so because of that, I try to communicate a little bit better, and it's not perfect. I have a ton of growth to do in the area of communication, but I try to do a little bit better, at least than the generation before me. And so I think that's important. I think it's important for all of us. I think it's important for our parents. I think it's important for our families to just understand where we are, um, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. Like, where are we? Are you at the end of your road? Like, what does it look like? What can I do? And so, I think about the things that I've picked up from mom in terms of like how learning to communicate the way that she communicated, and how just like cognitively, right? Like how does that work? How does it function? And so I remember a time, my grandmother, my grandparents, they helped me pretty much to raise my child. And so from the time that she was 6 months old until, honey, probably until COVID. So COVID started in 2020. My child was born in 2008. So 12 years. So for 12 years, my daughter was pretty much at my grandparents' house every day, even on weekends. Like we were there pretty regularly, almost every day. And so I don't know how old she was. She might have been 5 or 6, or I don't know. She was still young, like single digits young probably. And so she had a purse that it's a wristlet purse. And so the purse, she had it pulled all the way up to her shoulder. It's only big enough for a wrist, okay? But I mean, honey, had it pulled up to her shoulder, tucked in tight. And because she had it pulled up to her shoulder, I was like, what is going on? Why are you, honey, why are you carrying that purse like that? And so she was like, this is the way Granny carries it. And so, like, I don't think and believe that my grandmother sat her down and said, okay, this is a purse. this purse is only for the wrist, but we carry our purse tucked way up here. And the reality is she probably tucked it up there because, she didn't want anybody to get money out or whatever the case may be. But that's the way that she chose to carry her purse. And because she chose to carry her purse in that way, then and my daughter was with her on a regular basis every day of her life. She was with her every day. Like she just picked up on that. And so I had looked up like what is that called? And so it is called observational learning. And so observational learning is imitation with social understanding, and it tends to begin around 2 years old, but it can vary, right, depending on the specific child, because we all have different learning behaviors and all of that stuff, right? So observational learning. So I don't feel like my granny sat my daughter down and taught her that this is a purse and this is how you carry a purse and this is how you do this and this is how you do that, right? But just in seeing her and observing her for um, her whole life, no matter how old she was at the time, like just seeing her for whatever amount of years in her life carrying her purse like that, she said, "Oh, that's how you carry purses. Got it." And so I think about that in relation to myself and how I process things and how I communicate things. And so, no, my mom or anybody, right? School, no one sat me down and said, "Hey, this is how you communicate your feelings. This is how you tell someone you don't like something when they do something wrong to you. This is how you set boundaries. This is how you have conversations. This is how you check your tone." Like no one sat me down and said those things, right? I learned that through observational learning. Um, the thing about observational learning, though, is that there's no context, right? So I said my grandmother probably carried her purse tucked up under her arm like that because she doesn't want anybody to steal her money. Like she don't want nobody maybe to run by and snatch her purse. However, observational learning really limits that perspective. Kennedy was just thinking that's the way you carry your purse. But the reason you carry a purse like that is to protect your money. And so if you don't have like an actual lesson of that, she just observed that she doesn't have the cognitive awareness to say, "Oh, I need to be protecting my purse, period." Like I don't need to just lay my purse down anywhere because any day, any given day you look up, honey, the purse be in the yard, on the porch, in the backyard, on the swing set, down the street, on the sidewalk, just anywhere, right? So there was no cognitive understanding. I need to protect my purse with my money in it, but it's like this is how I carry the purse. And so that's the defect, right, of observational learning. It's good to an extent, but it doesn't give us the context that we need to really grow from those situations, to grow from those scenarios, to grow from those observations. Like we don't get that foundational learning. All we get is this is the reason why I do this. So when you relate that to emotions, in communication, like I don't know why I'm yelling. I don't know why she's yelling or why my parents are arguing, right? I don't know why this is happening. However, my observation says when somebody does something that I don't like, I yell at them. I hit them. I shut down maybe, like I don't know. I think we all need to think back into our households that we grew up in and look at how were things communicated. I feel like parents did a great job of trying to shield us from the bad stuff, so much so that we didn't learn the good stuff. Like um I remember my parents, my mom arguing, like I remember arguments. I distinctly remember arguments and yelling and fussing and cussing and all of that kind of stuff. Um, but I never remember how they made up, how they got back, how did everything get right again? Like, so from an observational learning perspective is, oh, okay, when stuff don't go how I want it to go, I'm gonna yell and scream and kick and holler and cuss and break stuff sometimes. Like, and so thinking back to that from a perspective of observational learning, like, I don't understand how to resolve conflict. I know how to be in conflict though. In conflict, I'm hollering, I'm screaming, I'm breaking stuff, I'm yelling and fussing and cussing. I know how to be in conflict. Like, even if you as a parent try to keep down the exposure of your kids to conflict, like, you probably yell and scream, you probably, handle things or mishandle things um in an inappropriate way. But, you know, nobody nobody teaches how to get out of it. And I'm not gonna say nobody. Maybe your parents did. Mine didn't. So I don't feel like it's a widely known thing. Just because I think it's partially embarrassing, right? Like, thinking about how I take care of emotions and in conflict with my daughter and in my daughter's presence, sometimes it's embarrassing, and so it's not something that people always want to acknowledge and talk about and say and do and handle. But it's definitely needed in terms of a uh, growth in conflict resolution in terms of that. So so that was kind of my study and observational learning, like how I learned to communicate, how I learned to handle things, how I learned to be better, how I learned to grow, how I learned to um, communicate, uh, how I learned to be violent, how I learned to break stuff, how I learned to argue, ooh, how I learned how to cuss any because I could cuss everybody, you, your mama, and your grandmother, and keep on going and not miss a beat. So I learned all of that stuff. Um, but observationally, like, and those are like adult temper tantrums is yelling and screaming and not having the appropriate tone and all of that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, I think it's beneficial for us in terms of our growth and being real grown, okay, is to think back on how conflict was handled. Conflict and communication, good and bad, in your house growing up, and see how that relates to the way that you handle stuff. It could be several different outcomes, right? Like, you could have different um, attachment styles, emotional intelligence, um, like it could just relate in a bunch of different ways. So I think it's definitely important for us to review it and to understand, like, how conflict is resolved even today with our own children, especially if you have children, or with our own spouses, or with our friends and friendships. Like, those things tend to trickle down and spread and seep into many areas of our lives. And so, you know, just thinking through that to get an understanding of how that works. And so last episode I had talked about me being a church kid. I was raised in the grand old Church of God in Christ, where you can't join in, honey. You got to be born in. Okay. And so I no longer attend church at a Kojic church. I go to a non-denominational church, but that's where I was raised. And so I think you would think that because you're raised in church that you learned emotional foundational principles, right? Like, don't hit, don't kick, don't spit, don't be mean, love, honor, respect, forgive, all of that stuff, right? Like, we're raised in church. You think that those things are being taught in safe space for people to understand so that you can live life. But I think it's not. Spoiler, okay? It's not being taught. It's not being instilled. I don't think at an early enough age. I think experience is teaching us how to communicate with our families and how to communicate with our children and all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of time that's too late, right? Like by the time me and my mom was really butting heads, I was a teenager and I wasn't trying to hear nothing at the church. Like I wasn't trying to hear no word. I wasn't trying to hear no teachers. And we had YPWW, we had Sunday school, we had purity class, honey. We had all of these different classes, and it was with me by the time. So even though we had all of these different avenues, I don't believe that they were transparent enough to prepare me for what I was going through and to prepare my mom for what she was going through with a teenager. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, prayer is great, prayer works, all of that kind of stuff. But I think that faith without works is dead, and that's in the Bible. Faith without works is dead, and so you have to not only just pray for God to fix and resolve a relationship with you and your children, but you have to also do the work. Do you need counseling? Do you need to help learn how to communicate? Do you need to sit down and just have a conversation? Because I do believe that older generations was just like, you're a child, stay in a child's place. You don't have any emotions. You don't have any feelings. Um, used to say, "Oh, something was getting on my nerves." You ain't got no nerves, okay? So you know all of that stuff, and that's not true, right? So that was the perspective of the older generation, and so I feel like it has diminished our feelings and our perceptions and all of that stuff for so long that now we don't acknowledge our own feelings. We don't acknowledge our own emotions. Like we just stuff them down, and keep going. Like just keep swimming, honey, like Dory. So it's just like, but that's not the way. Like you're gonna be lost, just like Dory. Dory was always lost. She didn't know where to go. She couldn't. She know where she was, who she was talking to. So that's something that we have to acknowledge as people, as a generation, as parents, as children, as all of the things is how can I better communicate? How can I better be aware, have better emotional awareness for my family, for my children, for my future generations. Like, how can I do that? And so I remember we used to have a youth explosion at church every summer. It was a summer. Yeah, I can't remember. It was every year though, for sure. I don't remember if it was the summer or not. We used to have a youth explosion every year, and the youth explosion was kind of like a revival format. So you know, it's preaching, teaching every night, but we would have on one of the nights we would have straight talk. Okay, it was straight talk, and so it was supposed to be an opportunity or a forum for we would submit questions as teenagers. We got a chance to submit questions to the panel. And when we would submit those questions, you know, they would read them and answer them accordingly. You know how they saw fit. And so the panel was a group of our youth. Um, what do you call youth department? There were a group of people from our youth department, and we would submit questions for straight talking. So we were Kojic. So at that time, a lot of us weren't wearing pants. So the number one asked question was, "Why can't we wear pants?" So we would talk about pants honey for an hour every year. Like, oh my God, every year modesty pins, nail polish, makeup, you know, like some variation of those things. But meanwhile, like we was having sex. Like we were having sex, we was in relationships, we was um, you know, I was sneaking people in and out of the house. I was, you know, trying to work through my own emotional disadvantages. Like, like I really needed to be having some straight talk. I had other stuff that I needed to talk about. But you know what? I wasn't even submitting those kind of questions anyway. Now that I think about it, like I wasn't submitting those kind of questions that were gonna lead us to talk about um those things. Like I wasn't asking questions about, you know, how do I process my emotions or how do I deal with horniness or how do I stay pure? Like how do I remain pure? Like we had purity class, but it was just like don't have sex. It wasn't like you need to do these things to abstain um to abstain from sex. Like, don't do this stuff. And I always remember my best friend that he used to, this is probably the best advice that I ever heard. He was just like, you got to stay in the right spaces because, honey, ain't nobody thinking about Jesus in the dark. And it's so true. It's practical, simple, but yeah, you can't be in a dark room trying to look at a movie and think that everybody think about Jesus and we just gonna watch this movie when your hormones are raging out of control, literally. Like you don't have any control. And so, I think that's very important in terms of getting some understanding of being grown and what it's like getting some um getting some control over those hormones and emotions. And so thinking through some of those situations and stuff, I think about um how those experiences impact my parenting today and my relationship today. Like a lot of those things seep into my marriage and into my relationship with my daughter. Like um my mom in her first marriage, I remember when it was ending, and so uh we lived in a house in Pleasant Grove. We lived in a house and I was little. Like I remember standing, leaving and turning back to look into my home and looking down the hallway and the light was on and my grandmother and my uncle were in the car waiting. They were picking us up. But he took everything from us. When we left, my mom had a car. My mom had we had our house or whatever. But I remember getting put out with almost nothing. Um, and standing in the doorway, looking down the hallway of my home, or what was my home, and feeling like numb because my reality had changed so much so quickly, right? And so we moved with my great grandmother and all of that kind of stuff. And but he put us out. He put us out. I think eventually we might have got a few things or whatever, but I remember that night just feeling like everything had been stolen from me. That it was all a lie. That I was gonna have nothing. Um, and we didn't, right? Like we literally moved in with my great grandmother and we slept on the floor of her 2 bedroom apartment. We slept on the floor of her 2 bedroom apartment in Murdoch Terrace, honey, and slept right on the floor until I think we eventually got an apartment. Yeah, I think we eventually got an apartment, but we slept there for I don't really remember exactly the time frame. I was young, so I was probably about maybe 6 or 7, if that. But we eventually got an apartment, and we started over. Like, we started over. I remember we had our same beds. The beds was red metal beds, and when you hit them, they would make that little ting 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 sound. My sister and I, we shared a room, and so we had the same bed, and so we had that. And so I remember us getting that, and that's the only thing I can remember us having was our bed. Like I don't really remember anything else, but the way that resonates with me now today emotionally is I feel the need to always have my own, and trust I struggle to trust my husband to provide a safe space for me without taking it away, if that makes sense. Like I'm always like wanting to make sure that I have that safe space in my back pocket. Like and that's how I struggle emotionally, and I struggle to communicate that and convey that to him, and so it it causes stress in our marriage because I can't adequately communicate what I'm feeling because I hadn't really unpacked it right. And then for him, he's not receiving the information because I can't communicate it. Like, so he can only receive what I'm communicating to him. And so I wasn't communicating it. And so that is something that has compounded into my marriage, something that happened when I was 6, 7, 8, maybe, still affects me today because I don't adequately communicate that experience, how it impacts me, and how I need to be responsible for managing that. Like there's a responsibility that I have that I need to go and get that resolved in counseling, like with the Lord somewhere. Like I need to be making sure that I'm resolving these things as opposed to just living in them, right? Because um, those things become our new normal. Not a new normal. Those things become a normal, and we develop a numbness to the pain. We develop a numbness to the distortion. We develop a numbness to the cause. We develop a numbness to the processing of it. And so it's like, oh, I don't like how this makes me feel. So I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it with my spouse. I'm not going to talk about it with my therapist. I'm not going to talk about it with anyone because I'm just numb to it. And this is a normal part of the way that I respond. So, like, yeah, that's it. And that's that on that. Like, that's all I'm doing. I'm not resolving it. I'm not working through it. I don't like when people do this. And so, because I don't like when people do this, then I'm going to have one of my adult temper tantrums and I'm going to shut down. I'm going to quit talking to you. I'm going to yell and scream. I'm going to break things. I'm gonna cut you off, honey, because people brag about having that cutoff spirit. I'll cut you off fast. So it just goes to show the emotional immaturity that we have because we refuse to go back and deal with that little girl standing in the hallway of the life that is no more. And that robs us of the future that God has for us. And so my scripture. I don't think I read my scripture today. Let me get my scripture. It's First Corinthians 13 and 11. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. And so, the first part of that says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. And so going back into that limited perception and perspective, like it is childish for me to feel like, okay, when I'm grown, I'm not going to have these problems. I'm going to be able to be free. I'm going to be able to do what I want to do because it's limited. It's a very limited boxed in perspective. And because of that, it caused me to speak like a child, which is uninformed, um, not understanding, no will to understand. So I'm speaking like a child. I want to be grown so I don't have no rules. I want to be grown so I can be free. I want to be grown so I don't have to do no chores. I want to be grown so I don't have to deal with having an attitude with my mama because she want me to do the chores. Like I don't want to be nobody's slave. I want to be grown for all of those reasons. And so that is speaking like a child. Um, and the second part, it says, I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. And so when you think about that, like reasoning like a child, like I think when I'm grown, then I don't have to do these things, right? Like there's a disconnect there because I'm reasoning like a child. I'm not looking as an adult. We have to look at several different aspects of every situation so that we can understand the totality of what's happening, right? And so when I'm troubleshooting something, I can't just look at the one thing that's blaring that's wrong. I have to look at what is the root cause of it. And so if I'm continuously always just solving the issue that's on top and never the root cause, then the issue on top just keep bubbling up to the top. It just keeps bubbling up to the top. And that's childish reasoning to think that I can solve the problem on the top and not deal with the root of it. Um, and think that everything is gonna be okay and that everything is gonna resolve itself and that everything is gonna be fixed. Like I need to go back to that 6-year old Paisley whose life as she knew it ended in that moment and understand that this does not apply to every area of your life. This does not apply to what you have with your husband. This does not apply to what you have with your child. This does not apply to what you have with your mom at 35. So I gotta go all the way back to age 6, understand what 6-year-old Paisley was feeling because those things teach us how to react subconsciously in our life. Observational learning. I observed that if I move in a house with a man and he pay the bills and he cover the things, he can take everything that you got. And so because of that, at 6 years old, I cognitively made up in my mind that that won't be me. I ain't doing it. Nope. Mm-mm. I'm gonna make sure I always got my own. I'm gonna make sure I got a house and I got the roof and I'm providing the roof so nobody can put me out and take everything away from me and my kids. That's crazy. Like, and I've talked about this in counseling, but like just thinking about it is thinking about it and thinking about the way that we process things and process emotions from 6 years old to now. I'm 35. I'm 35 and I still struggle. Like even though I've talked about it in counseling, like I still struggle with um that dynamic. Like and I feel like it's a part of the reason why I am the way that I know it is. I know it's a part of it, right? It's a part of my childish reasoning that I still feel that way today and that I still struggle with that today. Because I'm still working to solve that on the root cause. And so the other aspect of that is when I became a man, I gave up childish ways. And so back to what does it mean to be real grown, right? Like that's what it means to be real grown. It means to grow up and give up those childish ways. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of time, counseling, conversations, emotional healing, understanding, grace. It takes a ton of grace to understand what can I do to give up those childish things? What needs to be done? What systems are in place? What counseling do I need to take? What books do I need to read? What conversations do I need to have to grow from those ways that are childish? Like what needs to happen? What needs to occur? Like how do I know? How can I know what what I need to do so that I can give up those childish ways? And just kind of thinking through that. Listen, I've been saying I'm real grown for a long time, child. I am a child. So it's just like, oh Lord Jesus, help me. Um, but yeah, so just going back to what it means to be real grown. I think for me, I think it's the step of going back, like when you react to things inappropriately, and when I say inappropriately, like maybe you don't tear up everything, like maybe you don't break stuff, maybe you don't fight people, maybe you don't, you know what I'm saying? So those are kind of less aggressive responses, but maybe you just shut down. Maybe you don't want to talk about it. You know, like maybe you shut down and don't talk for days, or maybe you cut people off because your cutoff hand is strong, or maybe you, um, just zone out, black out. don't remember things. Like, I don't know. There's so many different coping mechanisms that our minds and our bodies have to help us to not feel the pain that we've endured. But I think that you have to unpack it, friend. You gotta unpack it. Like, you have to go back to the moment and say, and ask God to remind you, because sometimes we block stuff out, like, um, and I think it was in counseling that I went back to that moment of being that, and I'm saying 6, but I may not have been 6. I don't remember the exact age, but it was somewhere in there. Like, I was still definitely in single digits. Um, so going back to that 6-year-old Paisley, standing and looking down their hallway, like going back to that and understanding what she was feeling and what she was registering in her mind and what she was learning through observation, without context, right? Like, I don't know. Um, I don't really know the exact reason why they got divorced today. Like, actually, while I'm thinking about it, I don't know the exact reason. I mean, it was a volatile relationship, toxic, all of that stuff. But so I'm sure it has something to do with it, but I don't know. Like, in terms of like having sat down with my mom and talked to her about why her and my sister's dad got divorced at such a young age. I don't know. I don't know the reason why. Um, but yeah, but it doesn't change the fact of what I felt in that moment, what I learned in that moment, and what I'm still utilizing today that I learned from that lesson. Like, when you think about when you learn something, you continuously do it over and over and over and over and over the same way. Like, the unlearning that has to take place um, from that moment forward, it's a journey. Like, it's a journey to not see my husband that way. It's a journey to uh, make sure that my daughter doesn't feel what I felt in that moment, and that's a trauma response too. Yeah, listen, it's trying to protect my child from feeling the things that I felt as a kid unjustly, uh, as a bystander, right? Like, just as an innocent bystander, just trying to protect and shield her from this stuff. It's a trauma response as well. And so, like, listen, I think I got a counseling session next week. I got a lot to talk about. So, um, so yeah. So I'm been saying that I'm real grown for a long time. I haven't said it in a minute. But I definitely used to say it often. Because it's just like, I'm grown. I ain't following no rules. And that's the context I used to do. I'm grown, I'm not following no rules. I ain't having no curfew. I'm not coming home. I'm not saving money. I spend my money on what I want to spend it on. Like, I'll go where I want to go. I'll do what I want to do because I'm real grown. But thinking about what it means to be real grown, you need to be emotionally sound, emotionally cognizant. You need to do the things that you don't necessarily want to do. Like, in reality, I don't want no curfew, but is it safe to be out at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning? Is it safe to be out doing whatever? Like, is it safe to be doing those things? It's not. And, like, that's a part of being real grown. Like, being real grown is making decisions that keep you safe. Like, putting away childish things. It's childish just to want to be out and go and go and go and stay out forever, and it's not safe. It's childish to not want a budget, Paisley. Okay, budget. Like, it's childish to not want a budget. Like, I just want to spend, spend, spend. Okay, like, I just want to do that. I just want to swipe. I want to get what I want to get, and I want to keep on going. That is childish. It's childish because you're not ready for retirement. It's childish because you haven't saved no money. You're not budgeting. It's childish. Like, those are childish things that are taking place because I just want to spend money. I don't want to be limited. I don't want to be bound. Okay, where the spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, huh? Amen. No, no friend. No friend. Like you need a budget. And so yeah, so being real grown, it just means things that it is not living a life without restriction. And that's in my mind as a child, that's what I felt like being real grown was. I can't wait to live a life without restriction, where I can come and go as I please, where I can spend as I please, where I can do what I want, and I can be free. And that's just not the life. That's not a life without that's not being real grown is not a life without restriction. It is being a person of discipline. It is being a person of boundaries. It is being a person of moral compass, right? Like I just can't slap people, Paisley. Okay, you just can't slap people. Keep your hands to yourself. And I used to say that all the time. That's not something that I didn't hear as a child. It's just something that I didn't register. I guess I just chose to put that out of my mind. Okay. So yeah, you just can't do that. Like there are rules, boundaries, regulations for your own safety, for your own way in every aspect, in every area of life. And we have to adhere to those. Um, so we can be safe, so we can be productive citizens, so we can be, who God has called us to be. And so, I appreciate the scripture in First Corinthians, uh, you know, talking about putting away childish things and just kind of helping to remind me that needs to happen. Like, if you want to be real grown, this is the work that it takes to be real grown. And whoosh, Jesus. So, well, thanks for tuning in. And I want you to know, friend, we got to grow up for real, not just for the purposes of saying I'm real grown, but we have to grow up emotionally and mentally so we can be real grown. So if you haven't already, drop a comment down below. Let me know some of the things that you are, dealing with, some of the things, what you thought about today's episode. Like, let me know what, um, some other topics that you want to talk about, some other things that you want to explore, and make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell. Now, friend, we got to grow up for real. And I think, we can do that together. I look forward to growing up with you on this channel. I appreciate you for tuning in. I appreciate you for being a part of the conversation. Let me know down below. What are some things that you have learned? Do you feel like you have learned from growing up, and some things that you've learned from observational learning that you may need to put down and grow from? And so I'll end with a word of prayer. And so, God, we thank you and we adore you. We thank you for this moment in time, God. We know that this is a divine appointment, God. So I pray, God, that every person that is watching this video, God, that they would hear a word from you, that they would understand, God, what you are saying, that you would wrap your arms around them, God, that you would see them in their brokenness, God, and that they would see that you want to restore them, that you want to renew them, that you want to build them up, God. And so let this moment be used, God, for the edification of your body and your kingdom. And so, God, we thank you for all of the things that you have done, all of the things that you are about to do, and all of the things that you are doing right now, God. Touch every heart, every mind, God. Remind them of who you are, how great and how big you are, and that there is nothing impossible for you. And so we thank you and we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. See you next week, friend.